Welcome to New Rechts, or for our English listeners, New Right. My name is Daniel Liever, and today we're going to talk about the upcoming German elections. And to discuss this important topic, I am glad to once again talk to Dr. Werner Patzelt. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I guess last time we talked quite a bit about your academic career. So for people that are interested in that, they can look back at our previous interview. But you have been a professor in comparative government at the Technical University of Dresden and a senior fellow at MCC Budapest. And you had a long academic career so far in micro-sociological issues, revolving around like behavior of politicians and citizens. That's of course still very relevant today, I would say. You have written a lot on this in different journals, articles, book chapters, etc. So for people interested in your views on this, of course, there are many ways to find you. But today we're going to talk about upcoming elections on the 23rd of February in Germany. Before we get into what's going to happen now, let's look a little bit back. Of course, we had a previous government of Olaf Scholz that fell. Maybe we can start there. What you think about why it fell and what the consequences have been?
There are two basic reasons why this last traffic light coalition fell. The first reason is that these three parties really did not fit quite nicely together. Sure, the Social Democrats and the Green Party, they are, to put it this way, flesh from the same flesh. They are in very much agreement in terms of political visions, of political means, and so on. But this thing is not true for the liberals and the Green Party. So far in German history, the liberals and the Green Party have behaved like cats and dogs behave when they have an encounter. And it was at the beginning promising to see that they would be willing to cooperate. But actually, over the course of time, it turned out that the visions of the Green Party and the Social Democrats as to how the German budget should be handled and the plans of the liberals really were not in agreement. And so this coalition was full of conflicts between the coalition partners, in particular between the liberals and the Greens and the Social Democrats. So this is the internal reason of the failure of the traffic light coalition. But much more important is that the policies envisaged by these coalition partners did not stand the test of reality. Reality proved to be different from how reality was perceived as the basis of their common policy making. The first shock, of course, was the Russian aggression against Ukraine, which made the Green Party absolutely making a U-turn in their outlook when it comes to the use of military power as a political means for securing peace. Then came a ruling by the Federal Constitutional Court saying that the money which would have been available for follow-up corona measures could not be used for filling the gaps in the budget plans the new coalition has entered. Therefore, the coalition started with not having enough money to realize all their policies. And in addition, the migration topic was not really addressed by this government. Migration uncontrolled never stopped, although the government had said that they would try to control immigration into Germany. This has had some follow-up problems with a shortage in apartments to be rented by low-budget people. And with all this migration, there is no chance for low-budget people to find as easily as in earlier years fitting apartments. So this government did not really come to grips with reality as it is. And this was felt by so many Germans, and on top of the endless disputes within the coalition government, this gave a bad appearance of the government. And at the end, they decided to end this, so to speak, mésalliance, this wrong marriage they had entered.
Vergeet de NOS en de NPO. Het is tijd voor Nieuw Rechts, de nieuwswebsite voor rechtsdenkend Nederland.
That's, I guess, some interesting insight there. I'm curious, of course, we see not only the Green Party in Germany, but also, for example, the Green Party in the Netherlands, that there's this U-turn on the way it looks at the military. Why do you think that these historical parties that have been always for peace, you can think, for example, of the Vietnam War and other wars, Iraq War, where these parties were heavily for less military intervention, where did this change in this situation with Russia and Ukraine?
I guess the deepest reason is that the convictions as to the use of military power have never been as deep as the left made us believe. The public appearance was that the left would always resist the use of military power, which has not been true in the past, because acts of violence when in the service of leftist political ambitions, whether they were liberation movements or movements sponsored by the then Soviet government, they never were looked at as skeptical as the attempts of Western countries to secure peace by military strength. So my feeling is that the left quite often had an emotional approach to the whole issue of war and peace. And you can afford an emotional approach if you're not really directly threatened by the danger of war. And this has changed dramatically with the Russian invasion in Ukraine. War became something of reality, something which really is threatening European nations. And within the European Union and the NATO, it was quite clear that a reaction as outlined by the Polish government, by the Baltic governments, who really felt threatened by this Russian expansion, could not be without an impact of the Germans as the most important allies of Polish and Baltic states in Europe, not in the world, because this is the United States, but in Europe. So the responsibility to act in this situation of a leftist government made them change their positions. I do not doubt that if the Social Democrats and the Green Party would have had the role of the opposition when the Russian aggression came, they would have behaved quite differently from how they're behaving now. And so we can say it was a good coincidence that a leftist government had to shape Germany's reactions to the Russian aggression.
That's a funny observation that maybe they would have probably acted very differently. Do you feel like in Germany now at this point, of course, close to the elections, that people feel very threatened by the situation with Russia?
Well, the Russian war against Ukraine has been a topic and still is a topic because, of course, nobody in Germany wants war and nobody in Germany wants that German troops are involved in whatever role in this war. And the resistance of Germany to deliver far-reaching missile systems to the Ukraine has to do with the fact that Germans want to be kept out of any war. In one way, the Germans resemble people watching a soccer game with people, even bleeding on the soccer area because of so many fouls, saying, well, our team needs to win, but we really do not want to interfere. We only want to be observers of these things going on. Germany longs for living in peace, which has to do with the German history, of course. But that people in Germany would really feel direct threats by Russia or by a possible expansion of this war. This is not the case. It is rather a theoretical reaction saying, well, Germany never again must become a party in any war, and therefore let's stay out. Let's see that somebody, whoever, will make that Russia does not win this war, but please, we do not want to do the necessary work on the battlefield, no boots on the ground, only good wishes and some money. This is the widespread approach. And those who say, well, we need to move a bit forward, we need to be actively working for peace because we have a pacifist tradition. Well, this is what has shaped the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, the BSW in Germany, and even the AfD. And the particular accent in the program of the AfD is that they are to a significant part pro-Russian and anti-American. And since the basic feeling is that this is a war stirred by American interests in Europe, they clearly say, well, this is not our war, let's stay out, and no war at all would be the best solution. So it's a mixture of different German political traditions, it's a reaction to different forms of German traumas out of German history, but this is not the central topic of this electoral campaign. The central topic is migration. In the second place, migration, and in the third place, the reactions of the German political parties to the migration issue.
Okay, then let's move forward to migration. Of course, sadly, there has been some attacks recently in Germany. Of course, we have seen this happen over the last few years quite regularly. Why do you think that migration is becoming more and more important, specifically in this election, compared to, let's say, maybe last time?
See, migration has been a topic in German domestic politics since 2014 and 2015 latest, and absolutely latest 2016 after the sexual assaults in the night of the New Year's night in Cologne. It has been a topic, but the general reaction of the media people, of the political class has been, well, sure, we have some immigration. We need to have some immigration because we are an aging society. For humanitarian reasons, we should accept as many people who need to be protected from all over the world. This is our responsibility. And all these people who say that there might be, well, unpleasant consequences of this influx of migrants, well, they are simply racists and chauvinists and nationalists, and those voices do not need to be taken serious. And if there is a party giving voice to these concerns, well, this is apparently a new right-wing populist, a new Nazi party, a new fascist party, and therefore, let's not speak about these topics. Let's exclude members of these parties from public discussions. And this was a general reaction. The German political parties avoided circumspectly to make migration a topic in all the electoral campaigns that we have had after 2014. And this is the first time that migration can't be taken out of the electoral campaign. It is a topic, and it is a topic because we really have problems. We have an immigration per year of something like 350,000 persons, and there is no end to that. And the traffic light coalition even increase these problems with the changes, saying, well, someone who has been in Germany for years can become a German citizen, can never be driven out of the country, even if not behaving in a peaceful way. They have increased the possibilities for migrants to bring their families into Germany, with some cases where one single migrant has brought a family of 7-8 persons to Germany. So these problems have grown and grown and grown. And with all these murderous attacks during the last months, this has become even a central topic of public discourse, and all attempts by the Social Democrats and the Greens and a part of the Christian Democratic Union to keep this topic out of the electoral campaign have failed. And now all polls show what people really want is a change in our approach to migration.
I think that sums it up very well. I think when we talk about migration, I guess that's also part of the rise of Alternative für Deutschland, or AfD, in Germany. Of course, it's quite easy for, let's say, people in more left-wing media in Germany, but also in the Netherlands and other countries to call AfD for example, calling for remigration as an extreme party, like you said, fascist, whatnot. Do you think there's merit in the way that AfD is criticized for their potential migration policy as like this extreme right party?
Well, the whole attempt to frame the AfD as an extremist party has been partially successful only for a very simple and not really acceptable reason. In the use of the term extremism, we have had a change of meaning. In the German legal sense, extremism means active fighting against a liberal, democratic, rule of law-based political order. Whereas in the public discourse and even in the reports by the offices for the protection of the Constitution, extremism now is used as a synonym, as an equivalent term for radicalism. And radicalism means pushing a position to its extreme ends, where even a sound position can turn into a nonsensical position. But of course, being a radical is something which is granted by any liberal constitution, because there is no need to be only a moderate centrist person. There is a legitimate place for left-wing radicalism, ecological radicalism, even woke radicalism, and therefore for right-wing radicalism as well. No doubt, the AfD is to a significant part a right-wing radical party, and it is as a whole a right-wing populist party. But this does not mean that it is a party which is fighting against the liberal democratic constitution of Germany. And this is a misuse of the term, for which then many people in Germany really feel the AfD is something like, Nazi Party 2.0 or 3.0, or a revival of German fascism, which is obviously not the case.
That's a fair point. So I'm quite curious what you also think about the fact that AfD, of course, has been, let's say, communicating a lot with Elon Musk, of course, who is also now taking a central role in American politics on social media, since he, of course, owns X. Of course, they also had public discussion. Of course, Musk has also promoted AfD in newspapers, etc. This is, of course, this has been very critically analyzed by a lot of people that oppose AfD. But I'm curious, what do you think about this coalition almost between Elon Musk and AfD?
Well, this Musk and AfD thing is really a funny issue. Elon Musk always has had a positive acceptance by the German ecologist movement, because they produce electro cars, which are the future of mobility, and therefore it was just wonderful. When he took over X and made clear that X is not a network where only woke and leftist and centrist positions have a place, but it is a marketplace of ideas, then the leftist green part of the German political activists became skeptical. And he now was felt to be somebody, who is favoring right-wing positions as well. And when he really made up with Frau Weidel, then this was a sign of alarm. A millionaire, a rich person who can not only launch rockets but park them safely in a backwards movement, he's now siding with the AfD. This is an interference in German electoral campaign, and he's taking side with the wrong political party. This is the main feeling. This has been the main feeling. If he would have said, we need electoral mobility, and therefore I'm siding with the Green Party, and if he would have had been outspoken in favor of Robert Habeck and his policies, the German left would have embraced his interference in the German electoral campaign. But he was siding with the wrong persons, with his record of liberating X from left-wing liberal censorship. And therefore, this is handled as something like an outrageous scandal. Never forget the German politicians did not refrain from interfering with the American presidential campaign, saying quite clearly that Trump must not be elected and Kamala Harris would be the future of America. And everybody or nobody resisted this as an illegitimate interference in the electoral campaign of another country. Here, this is a threat to German elections. I think this is some kind of a phony war or hysterical reaction, which is not funded, which has no foundation in the very facts. Of course, it is helpful for the AfD, but the AfD would be successful, although Elon Musk would not have handled or would not have engaged in a talk with Weidel. And she, by the way, was not really strong in her conversation with Musk. And for intellectual observers, it was even detrimental for the AfD to have such a chairperson in a quite casual and not really important talk with somebody figured as a threat to German democracy.
That's a fair point. Actually, when we talk about the discussion, one thing I saw where people were extremely upset with AfD was this saying that Nazism was not really a right-wing ideology, but it was a left-wing ideology. I think this is where a lot of commotion also came from. Do you understand the commotion about it, and what are your thoughts on the fact that she made this statement?
Well, this statement was not really based on historical knowledge, or it was based on half knowledge. The Nazis quite deliberately called themselves National Socialists, and they wanted to make the distinction from National Socialists with International Socialists, which were, of course, the communists with their international networking and so on. And socialism at that time passed as a generic label for resistance to bourgeois liberal state, meaning that not a tiny bourgeois class of rich people should run the government, but the people in its social plurality, in particular the people which are not on the sunny side of the life, should have a say in politics. So the Nazis always were speaking, were referring to themselves as a laborers' party, speaking of the laborers with the mind and laborers with the hands. Those were the people they wanted to represent. And from a remote perspective, there are a lot of resemblances with the socialist movements. But it is quite clear that the analysis of society and societal problems of the Nazis was quite different from the analysis of communists. It is quite clear that the internationalism of the communist movement was not reflected, was not existent within the National Socialist movements, and therefore saying, well, those were communists is really wrong, but it is inviting because the Nazis, of course, were National Socialists, and since so many leftist people make no distinction between socialism and communism, this has been taken by Alice Weidel as well, something with which she could win an easy victory, but it was not an easy victory, it was no intellectual victory at all. It was really a mistake, a factual mistake, and a mistake in the presentation of herself and her party.
That's a fair point. I also want to talk with you about the CDU-CSU. Of course, this is led by Friedrich Merz. Of course, they were a quite important party already, let's say, under Angela Merkel when they were ruling as well. They seem to have now a more right-wing approach than under Angela Merkel, and in the polls, they're at around 30% at the moment, and quite by a big margin, the biggest party. So I would assume that they will have the decision to make with who they will rule. But before we go into the whole coalition thing, I wanna know what you think about CDU and their transformation. I see that Merz is also talking quite strictly about migration and imposing rules there. What can you say about this party?
Well, the tragedy of the Christian Democratic Union starts with Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel started as a quite liberal politician. If they ever had political convictions at the beginning of her career, she presented herself as a liberal person, saying, well, migration is not helpful and we need to liberate the economic system to get back to competitiveness and so on and so forth. With a radical liberal program, she nearly lost her first electoral campaign against Gerhard Schröder. who was not held in high esteem at that time. It was quite sure that the Christian Democratic Union would win the elections, and nevertheless, nearly the election was lost by Angela Merkel. And since this time, she really tried to, pursue a policy course which would not earn her much criticism. She always tried to be in line with public opinion, which she could influence due to her close ties with leading journalists, with a leading publisher's family, and so on. So she was shaping public opinion, and she was trying to surf on the waves of public opinion. Mm-hmm. And this she did so successfully that she, throughout her chancellorship, was one of the most popular German chancellors we have ever had. And since she had no real conservative convictions, if they have had any convictions at all, and not only wanting political power to maintain her position, then one can say that she was the first Green Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, or a Green Social Democrat Chancellor, because she really was inviting the Green to participate, not directly in government, but in the shaping of the policies pursued by Angela Merkel's coalition governments. And usually she was in a coalition government with the Social Democrats. So it was no wonder that she was, after a while, much more popular among the Greens and the Social Democrats than in their own party. In the Christian Democratic Union, her greenish, Social Democrat, or woke political course, over the time it became really woke, this course was resented by the still existing conservative wing of the Christian Democratic Union. And to consolidate her political power, Angela Merkel was very successful in dwarfing the conservative wing of the Christian Democratic Union. And she was so popular among those who said, well, the future of the Christian Democratic Union lies in coalitions with the Green Party. The Greens are the party of the well-educated and rich middle classes, academic middle classes, and we, the Christian Democratic Union, we are the political party of, the middle class and the political center. Therefore, we are destined for each other, the Greens and the Christian Democratic Union. And this still can be seen right now when we have really discussions whether the best coalition partner of the CDU might be the Green Party. So Angela Merkel was alienating a big part of her own party against herself. And what was more important, she was alienating many, many, many voters of the Christian Democratic Union. And it was in particular her migration politics, which made the AfD great. And if you look at the numbers of AfD voters, more than 20% usually, in East Germany, even sometimes close to or over 30%, the most part of them in earlier times had voted for the Christian Democratic Union. So the politics of Angela Merkel expelled a lot of, old Christian Democratic people to the AfD. And this is the tragedy of the CDU right now. With the AfD together, people who want to have a right wing or a center-right government are the majority in Germany. But due to the circumstances, the blackmailing by media and the framing done by the Green Party and the Social Democrats, the Christian Democratic Union has promised never to cooperate with the AfD, which of course makes them dependent on the goodwill of the Green Party and of the Social Democrats, which can be seen in this electoral campaign and will be seen even more clearly during the coalition negotiations. So the tragedy starts with Angela Merkel. That was, so to speak, in the position of a political exile after Merkel's victory over him, because he was in a very promising position after the end of the political career of Helmut Kohl. Merkel won. He was waiting for his chance to come back. He came back, but his big mistake was to continue the course of Angela Merkel as long as it was possible. Might be, I should add a final remark on that. the position of Friedrich Merz when he came back as the party chairperson of the Christian Democratic Union was a rather weak person, because the majority of the functionaries of the CDU disliked him. And in all party boards, the adherents of Angela Merkel still were in the majority. Therefore, he could not make this type of U-turn he tried to make now with the party manifesto for the federal elections, which is quite different from the policies of Angela Merkel, but is not really fully accepted within the CDU. So this is a tragic situation, both of Friedrich Merz, both of the Christian Democratic Union.
That's interesting. That leaves us now in this situation where, if you believe the polls at the moment, we have 30% for CDU-CSU, we have 20% for AfD, for SPD 17%, and a little bit less, like 40% for the Green Party. Like you said, CDU-CSU said they will never rule with AfD. So does it mean, do you believe actually that if AfD will become the second biggest party of Germany, that actually there will be zero talks with AfD, zero chance of having a coalition between the two parties?
Well, nowadays, the AfD is willing to cooperate with the CDU, which was not the case during the last years. Therefore, the position of the CDU was much more easier than it is today, because the AfD clearly said, we do not want to cooperate with this CDU, who has brought us into all the mess which we are in. So the situation is different. On the part of the CDU, it would be difficult to enter in any form of talks or coordination with the AfD, because the CDU has declared many times, thousands of times, that this party will never cooperate with this fascist party of the AfD. Even that motion, which today will be discussed in the German Bundestag on migration, where the AfD will vote for, AfD is quoted as a danger for German democracy. So the CDU itself is not willing really to be open for a cooperation with the AfD. But since the Christian Democratic Union now can be blackmailed by the Social Democrats, if the Social Democrats turn out to be the only possible coalition partner of the CDU, because CDU can be blackmailed, and she has to give up all the own political positions in a coalition with the Social Democrats, who want really a different policy, in particular when it comes to migration. Coalition talks will be difficult. Against this backdrop, let me make not a prophecy, not a prediction, but show you a scenario. After the elections, the CDU will be the strongest party and therefore will be in charge of forming a government. With the AfD, no cooperation is possible. Therefore, the CDU engages in coalition talks with the Social Democrats. Hopefully, is the Liberal Party back in parliament, then the FDP can be included. Presumably not, possibly yes. We will see. So there are coalition talks. The SPD knows that she is the indispensable coalition partner. Maybe there will be talks with the Greens, but today it does not look like, because the Greens really detest this U-turn in migration politics made by Friedrich Merz in the recent weeks. So the Social Democrats can, well, dictate to the Christian Democrats the political positions. And if the Christian Democrats do not want to lose the rest of their credibility, one day they will have to confess to the public, well, we have really tried hard to negotiate a coalition contract. Apparently it was impossible. Now we have nevertheless to come to the election of a chancellor due to our constitutional practices. There will be a proposal by the federal president that the leader of the strongest party, this is Friedrich Merz, should be elected by the Bundestag as federal chancellor. He will only win a relative majority, so he fails. Then, according to the German constitution, there are 2 weeks in which the parties in the Bundestag can find another candidate who might have an absolute majority of votes, which will not be possible. And according to the constitution, after the period of 2 weeks, a war attempt will be made to elect a chancellor. This time, of course, Merz will be one of the candidates or the candidate. He will not win an absolute majority. And in this case, the federal president either can dissolve the national parliament or nominate the candidate without an absolute majority, chancellor with all the rights of a chancellor. Since everybody knows that in the case of a dissolution of the Bundestag and new elections, the AfD would increase by 4 and the leftist party would be dwarfed. The federal president, a social democrat, will not dissolve the Bundestag, and therefore we will have a minority government under a Chancellor Merz, and this minority government will have to and will be entitled to talk with all political parties. So in this way, the so far excluded cooperation of the Christian Democrats with the AfD will occur. I may be wrong, but in my analysis of the dynamics of German politics, this is the most probable outcome, unless the Christian Democrats will enter in a coalition with the Social Democrats on social democratic terms, which will be the beginning of the end of the CDU, because then the AfD will win more and more support, and the Christian Democratic Union of Germany will share the fate of the ÖVP in Austria, if not even the bad fate of the Cristiana Democrazia in Italy.
Or even in the Netherlands, we have the CDA, which used to get 1/3 of the seats at one point, and now they are not very relevant anymore. So but I get your point. I appreciate this analysis. I think it's one you don't hear very often, but I agree that it could be quite probable. But then the question becomes, there are quite some serious problems now in Germany, not only migration, but also with the economy, where you see deindustrialization in Germany happening. At some point, these problems will get bigger and bigger if there's no stable coalition, right? So let's say that we're in the scenario that you described. Do you actually think that these very complex issues, like migration, like the economy, maybe like housing, etc., that they actually can be solved under these circumstances, or do you think the problems will only get bigger?
The first step of my argument, in a coalition of the Christian Democrats with the Social Democrats, and even, or in the worst case, with the Green Party, none of these problems will be solved, because the visions of the Greens and the Social Democrats as to migration, energy policies, and so on, or the establishment of the welfare state, are so that only a continuation of politics conducted so far will be acceptable for them. And it is exactly this green leftist policies which have brought Germany in the situation of deindustrialization and so on and so forth. So the most popular, not the most popular, but the mostly recommended coalitions, Christian Democrats with Social Democrats and so on, will not be able to solve these domestic problems. If you look at the party manifestos of the CDU and the AfD, there are broad intersections. Here, policies could be hammered out, which would be supported by both parties. So this could be a solution if the AfD would be prepared for assuming political responsibility. But to add one more tragic element to this tragic overall picture, it seems to me that the AfD is as nicely prepared for assuming political power as Robert Habeck was prepared to be Germany's Minister of Economics, not being prepared at all. And this seems to be the problem with many top politicians of the AfD. And at this stage, we have not yet spoken of the problems posed for German and European foreign policy and security policies, because in NATO and in Brussels, Germany needs to have a clear position, which Germany usually does not have. And this position will be hardly to be obtained, because never forget, we have two chambers in German policymaking, the Bundestag and the Bundesrat, and the Federal Council, consisting of the governments of the German Länder, at present has many governments with coalitions of the Social Democrats and the Greens, and according to German constitutional practice, state governments, Länder governments who cannot agree on the vote in the Bundesrat abstain from voting, but according to the rules of voting in the German Federal Council, an abstention is counted as a no. Therefore, for many political issues which require the consent of the Bundesrat, like foreign policy, many foreign policy issues, if they go along with financial obligations, there will be no clear policy possible because both chambers in the German legislative process will disagree, in particular if there would be a government supported by the AfD. So the outlook is not a good one. We are really in an impasse, and this is a tragedy for Germany and, unfortunately, or of course, for Europe as well.
Yes, I get your point. So, but at some point, if you zoom out a little bit, if you look at the situation where, like, of course, now we saw with the government of Scholz that fell because they could not come to agreements on issues, economic issues, mostly, as we already discussed in the beginning. If we get to this unstable situation where there's an impasse and there's no situation, do you believe then we'll maybe at some point we'll also go to new elections and AfD will get even bigger? We get into this spiral, or do you think we'll just see nothing? I can hardly imagine that nothing will happen in Germany and people just accept it, the people of Germany.
I would be very, very surprised if we would not have new elections quite soon after the formation of a new government. If it is a minority government, well, it will not last long. If it is a government of the CDU with the SPD, it will not last long either. So we will have early elections in the fall of this year or next year latest, because as long as our political class is not willing to shape policies according to the will of the majority of the German population, which now wants center-right politics, not left-center politics. As long as the political class is trying to avoid that, we won't have any stability. We will have a growth of the AfD, and this will do harm to German political stability.
Thank you so much for your analysis and for this interview. I think for our viewers, we got maybe not a very positive outlook, but at least hopefully a more realistic one. I want to thank you, and let's say that people want to follow more of your work. Where can they follow you?
Okay, fine. Thanks for the interview, and all the best for you and for Germany and for Europe, of course, as well.
Thank you very much. And I also wish the best to our readers and listeners. If you want to support this kind of conversation, please go to nieuwrechts.nl, and I will see you in the next one.